This is more of a broad introductory session in the same way that smoke testing can be quite broad in itself. But I hope that this will be valuable to you. Maybe more than once. That's a good answer. Yeah. So quick intro. I'm Natalie. I'm from Shipyard, and this is my session on smoke tests with Cypress. So we're going to be doing this in real time. We're going to be setting up the scope for smoke testing a section of an app and setting ourselves up for success, and then learning how we can automate this with GitHub Actions and get this done basically instantly as soon as a build is finished. Yes, define smoke test. We will do that in the presentation because, yeah, there are quite a few different types, as you might know. I think it means different things to different people, even just within the software testing world, but we'll get into that. And again, my coworker AK is here. If you guys have any questions in the chat during the presentation, like if you have technical difficulties with the repo or anything like that, he will be there to help you out there. All right, so I guess we can probably kick things off. So this workshop's called Smoke Tests with Cypress, and we're going to be talking about how you can write super small, super quick tests, smoke tests, to sanity check your code at the time of a deployment. So that way you can go back and know what to attend to. And again, I'm Natalie. I'm from Shipyard. And yeah, today I'm calling in from Chicago, but I'm living in Boston. So it's still morning for me. So I hope this is either, yeah, a good way to start or end your day, or yeah, just a good bookend to a wonderful, wonderful CypressConf. All right, so before we get started, you're going to need a few things set up. First and foremost, you're going to want to have your IDE of choice. Ideally, it's one that you have installed on your computer. It could be a web-based IDE. I haven't tested that out, but I think that you probably have enough tools there. If you have, as long as you have an IDE and a shell and are able to import code from GitHub, I think you'd be fine. You also want to make sure that you have Cypress installed. If you go in your terminal, just make a new directory, change directory to that project, and run the Cypress install command just so you have that in the scope of the project. That's a good way to set yourself up for that. So I'm going to give you a few seconds to do that. Let me know if you need more time, but just make sure that you have a good, solid project directory. All right, and once you have your directory ready, I want you to go to this link, bit.ly/Cypress25smoke, and that's going to take you to a template repo that I've made to accompany this workshop. You're going to fork and clone it to that same project directory that you had from before, and yeah, just make sure that you're all set up. So this does have some, I call it a template repo because it has some tests already, but what we're going to be doing in this workshop is we're just going to be kind of studying them and extending them and working from there. All right, so I'm going to give you another, let me know if yeah, so the repo right here, I'm going to share that. So that link should take you to this repo. Yeah, basically we have our Cypress tests in this directory. Since a smoke test is technically a type of end-to-end test, our spec is in there. And any info that you might need for this workshop, you should be able to find in the README. Yeah, so that's how you'll get set up. So back to the slides. Okay, so going into the whole why of this. Why are we doing this? Why are smoke tests an important thing and something that you'll want to have in for your application? But just going into, so again, smoke tests, that can mean a lot of different things across industries and even within the software industry itself. But when we're talking about smoke tests today, we're talking about like at the core, does the app start and load properly? This is typically done at the build level. You've already deployed your code to a remote environment. You're not necessarily testing static code. You're testing to see how it functions live, because this could catch anything from app-related problems to infrastructure-related problems, and you'll want to narrow it down quite quickly. So yeah, checking to make sure that the build went through, and if it's even something related to the code changes that were made. So smoke tests are important because they show us, is this build even worth testing to begin with? I mean, not even worth testing, but can you even test it? Because if these don't pass, you can't test new features. You can't really likely, you have some component of your full stack app is non-functional, and you can't really go from there. So that makes things tricky. And a failed smoke test means that something absolutely critical is broken, and you have to look at which test failed, what scope it might cover, what that might mean, what it might indicate, and circle back to the devs, point them to that, and have them remediate from there. And ideally, it's something with that they can narrow down from the smoke test itself, but it's not always quite that simple. But at least you'll give them a good, solid starting point, and you won't waste any more time messing with this faulty build, because you'll know from right off the bat it doesn't even have the minimum functionality. So this is a small history lesson, but smoke testing, like in concept, has been around for a couple hundred years. And like I said earlier, it's not necessarily constrained to software. It's also popular in the hardware world. But even before that, in the mechanical and plumbing spaces, this was something that was used to test if a system was good to go. If you pipe smoke through like a series of pipes or a machine, and if you see leakage somewhere, that means that the basic functionality of the system itself is not quite sound and solid. So you're going to have to go back and remediate somewhere. And it's very easy to see because smoke just so happens to be pretty visible. So if, for example, if you're a plumber and you see smoke, you're able to quickly zero in on where the leak is in your pipe system and fix from there. And metaphorically, that's kind of going to be what we're going to be doing with software. We're going to be seeing like, yeah, which smoke test failed and what might that indicate? What might that say about our app? What was the scope of that test in itself? So what can smoke tests do? I'll let people in the comments throw out some things, because they can do many things. They can tell us a lot about our app, even though they are quite broad, quite shallow. We can still gather a lot of information. So if there's anything in particular that a smoke test can do, feel free to drop that in the chat. Yeah, Ed is right. Tell us there's a fire in our app. Yeah. They're a really solid way for just assessing basic reliability, because if the smoke tests don't pass, what do we even have? Warn early on in life cycle. Yeah, that's very true. It's very nice to be able to run these before we spend any more time dealing with the faulty build, save a lot of time, and just get super quick feedback that something's gone off the rails. Yeah, so what we're going to do in this scenario, the smoke tests are going to be super valuable for testing the basic and broad app functionality super quickly. And by quickly, I mean like as soon as we get the app deployed itself. We want to make sure that the deployment and infra is cooperative, that things went through. We have our build. Perhaps we've run some like initial unit tests, but how is the app functioning in the environment? Is anything? Do we even have like a minimum functional app? We also want to fetch essential resources. We want to check the API, check the status codes, check any CDNs or external resources that we might be pulling into our app or we might be relying on, because maybe the app failure isn't related to something within our app, but maybe it's an external API that we're pulling from, a library, maybe it's a CDN, just making sure that that's all in order. We also, particularly in this workshop, we want to make sure that the UI render is working well. And of course, this could indicate a few different things. This could mean maybe our front end service is struggling and suffering. We can hopefully narrow it down to that. Or yeah, maybe something didn't deploy correctly. Or maybe it's just a broken build or broken front end code that was somehow changed and edited. And you know why I say that, why I say somehow changed and edited, is I think you know where this is going, especially when I talk about testing in the year 2025. I'm sure that you've all dealt with this. Um, what might be exclusive to 2025 that has only been around for a few years, at least at the enterprise scale, that we're dealing with and kind of adapting to? And that would be AI agents, and they're writing a ton of code. I mean, this has been really great. It's been a huge productivity boost. It's a great way for you to get like an instant pair programmer who can help you work through your own challenges and solve better. There are, yeah, many, many benefits to this. Although, unfortunately, LLMs are inherently prone to hallucinations, or yeah, they can break things. They don't always make the correct choices. And actually, mathematically, an LLM cannot not hallucinate. So even though we're getting much better, we're having much stronger guardrails, it's not ever going to be 100% quite secure. So we're still going to rely on smoke tests. And a lot of developers now are implementing smoke tests in ways that they hadn't before, or they hadn't had them all together, but now they're seeing the value of that, because when you have agents who are potentially changing code that maybe a human wouldn't have, or maybe you're if someone is using dangerously skip permissions or vibe coding, you never know what can get changed. So being super mindful there. So we want to make sure that we're checking, because so many things can go wrong, so many things that we might not be prepared for. We want to make sure that we're checking the bare minimum functionality of a deployed app before running any end-to-end integration tests or asking for code review. And some people will run integration tests before smoke tests. I think it really depends on how smoke tests are defined within your org and what the role of them is. So it is really a case-by-case basis. And we can use this early smoke test feedback to fix faulty code changes, just kind of seeing like, hey, that was unusual. We didn't expect that, but it's good that we caught it, because we would have had some unprecedented test failures. And for something that we wouldn't have even that we would have found later, we would have had a test fail, and it would have been a false negative, because the feature itself might be working, but maybe the underlying infrastructure is down. So that's a good question. How can we use agentic AI automation for Cypress testing? There are a lot of ways. I think, especially like if you're talking about the AI automation part, you could use Cypress with a coding agent like Claude Code or Codex or Gemini CLI, and I'll get the GitHub link for you. Let me just paste that there. Yeah, but what you can do with a coding agent is basically like you can run your tests, you can see where they fail, and you can use the context from maybe the error messages and kind of zero in on, hey, this looks like this part of the code base is faulty or has a bug, and you can have the agent apply those error messages to the tests themselves, or just the general code base, and work from there. Yeah, so that's the GitHub link. And just super quickly, of course, there are many ways to do this. For the sake of this workshop and for the type of smoke tests we're doing, just want to give a quick 1, 2, 3 on how one would write a good, solid smoke test. So step 1 is investigating and seeing what we're dealing with. In the repo here, there's a link to the recipe book app. Feel free to click that, check it out. I'm going to use it in this tab. Just kind of click around, maybe open up the developer tools. Yeah, just see see what you might use to select different UI elements. Maybe look at the network tab. Just feel free to poke around. This is an app that I made for another reason, and then I realized this would be really solid for smoke testing. So, oh, someone asked which agentic AI tools are compatible with Cypress. And I think Ronald can probably answer this, but if you're using a coding agent, pretty much any general mainline agent could be compatible with Cypress, just because if you're able, as long as you're able to, refer them to the documentation. And I know that, sorry, excuse me, a little cough. As long as you can refer them to the documentation, they can learn the Cypress conventions, read the docs, and understand what they're doing. Yeah, so right now I'm inspecting the environment that we're going to smoke test. This is an ephemeral environment running on shipyard infrastructure. And basically all it does is it takes the repository from my application, and it takes the Docker Compose and it instantly deploys it to a remote ephemeral environment. And these environments are super easy for smoke testing because as soon as you build your app, you can point the smoke tests to them immediately and get feedback. So if it takes, like, say for this app, it takes about 1 minute to build it, the smoke tests in total that we're going to write are probably going to take, I don't know, 15, 30 seconds to run. So if you, as soon as you open a pull request, you can know whether your environment is functional within like a minute and a half. For a simple app like this, perhaps if you're working with a more complex app, maybe within 10, 20 minutes, 30 minutes even if it's quite large. But just getting that feedback is super important, and you can be really quick to remediate any issues. So yeah, so we're investigating what's on the page, looking at the dev tools here. We're going to see, so this particular environment, I wanted to make it very test friendly. So I added test IDs to all the UI elements so we know what to look for. So we're going to be checking for things like app title and the username form. And I also added ARIA labels because eventually we also want to be making sure that our accessibility elements are properly rendering. Step 2 is define scope. So how much are we testing here? And smoke tests do, inherently, they are quite broad. But in this case, we're casting a few very broad smoke tests, but we're also doing some narrower ones, whittling it down a little bit, especially when we're going to be looking at some of the UI elements and forms. So at least in this case, we're going to be writing smoke tests in chunks, and we're going to be focusing on this login form. We're not really necessarily going to be interacting with it, but we're just going to make sure that, the page loads, the forms render, the form elements are actually usable, clickable, all of that. And just by setting the scope, we can define what behavior we expect, and then we can test for that. And step 3, we want to define our test goals. So, and we also want to go from basic to complex. We want to see, at the end of the day, what do we want this set of tests to tell us about our app? Do we want to say hey, the deployment's successful, all the services are present, we can continue testing? It depends on your team, really, how deep you want to go. Maybe your team has some more specific needs that they need to know that a certain element is always functional in order for the app behavior to be up to spec. But this is going to be something that is pretty personal to you and your team, and what you need for testing your app. So yeah, setting the goals and then doing them basic to complex. So that means first checking something super basic, super easy, does it even load to begin with? And then later checking, do elements appear? Because just like why you would smoke test before doing something like your full end-to-end test suite, is that as soon as you check, does it load, and that fails, then why is it worth running any further smoke tests at that point? You know that right from the get-go, your app is not where it needs to be. Yeah, so we're going to be, in this case, inspecting, going back to the recipe book app and just going to the network tab. We can reload that there, and we can see we have all these 200 status codes, which this is the expected ideal behavior. We can see that a lot of them are serving from the shipyard domain, which is where our app is deployed. But we also have, like, for example, an external CDN. We have Google Fonts. So if, for example, our font was showing up maybe in Times New Roman instead of whichever, I guess this is Roboto right here. If that hadn't been working properly, we would know, like, okay, well, that's because we have an external CDN that's irresponsive, and that is not on us. We just need to wait for it to resolve, or we need to escalate it with the relevant support team for that particular CDN. So again, this is you have another chance to get your tests here. This repo is just the tests themselves, because really, like, at the end of the day, to write good smoke tests, you don't necessarily need the context of the app itself. Everything we're doing today, we can determine just by inspecting the page itself and going to the dev tools and finding out what we need, because these are quite bare bones tests. And we aren't necessarily, there's no special syntax that we're going to need, like for like perhaps like the database or interacting with anything further than that. So if you haven't yet, just get this repo. You can fork it so you have your own copy, and then clone it to your local machine, and you should be all set up. If anyone needs any more time, let me know, and we can pause a little bit. Yes, but this should be the app that you need. Also, once you have this on your machine, why don't you go to the directory that it's cloned to? It should be called Cypress Smoke Testing within that directory you created. And make sure that you are installing the dependencies so things work properly. So that's just running npm I. And then also beyond that, we want to make sure that our Cypress config is loaded correctly. So we also want to run npx cypress open and go to the settings tab. So if you have Cypress installed, this will launch the UI version. You're going to see a few different tabs going on, but there will be one that just says settings, and then that will show like all the configured environment variables and any other things that they pulled from the Cypress config. And if you get an error here, you'll know that something was not done correctly, and then you can let us know, and we will troubleshoot with you. Yeah, so your dependencies should install super quickly, and then just test the config by doing that. And Cypress should launch. When it does launch, you might have to click the end-to-end tests modal just to see that get to that to navigate and make sure that you're looking at the correct settings and config. But from there, you should be pretty set. All right, so test one, super simple. We're just checking that the page itself loads. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to call this a sanity check, and it just should have HTML content. So in this case, we're visiting the base URL. The base URL was defined in the Cypress config. What I did was I have 2 shipyard environment links. It's going to pick one at random, and it's going to set that as the base URL. So then that way, if there are a bunch of us visiting these, we have them working. So the base URL is essentially going to be either this or another one. So we'll have that there. We're checking to make sure that the body content exists to begin with. If that doesn't exist, that means that something on the front end just did not render whatsoever. And then we also want to do a second one. We want to check to make sure it has working APIs. This is like the bare bones minimum viable functionality of the app itself. So we're going to make a request to the API endpoint, and we're going to make sure that its status code equals 200. The status code or the API itself, if you just append the API slug to this environment, you should see that. So that should be like slash API. You should see we have 3 endpoints here, but we've successfully connected to the API. We've gotten a status code 200. So you just want to make sure that you can replicate this behavior with your initial smoke tests. So feel free to run that test now. I believe that the command is npx Cypress run dash dash headed. That should run it in headed mode just because we want to see that it actually goes to the environment and successfully completes. Also, I added some sci.wait statements just so we can see this kind of happen in slow motion. So it will pause after each test runs just so you can see what it looks like, and you can see it visiting that remote shipyard URL. Yeah, so this is the command you'll use to run your tests. So right now, every test is commented out except that first sanity one. Yes, thank you, Caitlin. npx Cypress run dash dash headed. And if anyone wants to drop in the comments, what was your result? What did you see? What happened? I'd love to hear. Did you learn anything that you didn't know about your app? And probably not, but who knows? And let me know if anyone's struggling to get this set up correctly. AK and I are here to help, and we can take a look. They passed. Yeah, I know. That's good. It's more of a test of, are the tests working versus is the app itself working? Because we have manually verified that the app itself is working. Oh, except here, it looks like that's interesting. My favicon was blocked. That might be more of a permissions issue or CORS issue versus here. All right, so I'm going to give you a quick task. I'd like you to extend the test to work with the other API endpoints that we have here. So as you saw when we went to the recipe book API slug, we could see that we did have 3 more endpoints. And I just want to make sure that they're all returning 200 all the time, because if they're not, that means that something has gone terribly wrong. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to just extend that. You might want to put that under the working APIs test, but it depends on how you prefer to organize your Cypress tests. That's really up to you. And let us know if you have any questions here. All right. Is everyone pretty much set? We can continue on to the next step. I mean, just to double check that everything's working, feel free to run those again, see what happens, see if they pass. In a perfect world, they should. So we'll have our first official test completed, our sanity check. Caitlin's giving a thumbs up, so that's awesome. So I think we're going having some success with our smoke test, which is awesome. And then we're going to move on to test number 2. So in this case, I commented out test number 2, so you can start by just like uncommenting that. You can go to view it in GitHub. Yeah, so we want to check that the UI elements are rendering correctly. And basically, we're going to be doing this by test ID. This is something that you can kind of poke around to see which test IDs are available and which ones are high priorities. So we're checking to make sure, like, hey, the login page should be visible. It shouldn't be hidden. It shouldn't be, have a Z index that just leaves it off the page. We want to make sure that the login form container is present, as well as something like the app title. And again, you probably know that these are not necessarily the most important parts of the login page. We have quite a few UI elements. We probably have about, I don't know, probably about a dozen. Nothing super important, but we do have a few things that we want to verify. And, if one is broken, maybe that indicates that there's a problem with several others. But we just want to make sure that, we're checking to make sure that we're not somehow missing a login box, or that this form altogether, if we somehow had, an HTML body, but no login form itself, if we just had a blank page. So yeah, you feel free to run those tests. This is what it should look like uncommented. And then I also did add a sci.wait just so we can see what happens. But yeah, feel free to run npx cypress run -- headed and just see those in action. We're also making sure that the page title is correct. So did this test pass? I think I know the answer. I think it did. Test 2 was missing sci.visit, so it didn't pass until I did it. Okay, that's good to know. So if you're having issues here, you might want to add a sci.visit and then to the empty base URL, just do the / and get that to pass. Read Caitlin's comment in the chat. Yeah. So going to give you a task here. We're going to extend the test to check for the other UI elements. We have a few here, but this should be all from the test IDs, and you can just kind of copy and paste these statements and modify them as needed. Make sure that these are visible, or maybe you want to check a certain type of content, maybe like, for example, recipe book, or check that the form itself has the username field. It's, yeah, whatever. This is pretty open-ended, and what you think is important to you about a UI element render test. Could I paste the test IDs in the chat? I believe that these are the test IDs here. Let me go back to my here. I'm gonna open this in another tab, and then I will. Where is it? Duplicate tab. Let me pull this out so we're. Okay, there they are. Yes, or you can either take them from the chat, or you can take them from the inspector. Yeah, of course. Yeah, let me know if you have any more questions. Yeah, like maybe you want to check to see that create account has that correct text, or it says don't have an account, but this text actually is present in the element that it's in, which in this case, this is a sign up prompt, so making sure that has the text that we're expecting. And these tests are so much more narrow than the tests in task 1, just because we verified the bare bones basic functionality. And now we're checking to make sure, like, maybe these tests check to make sure that an agent hasn't modified our login form beyond recognition, or it hasn't somehow disabled or toggled off any of our important UI elements. And that can happen with coding agents now and then, so you can never be too careful. I feel like it's probably enough time to move on to the next step. Someone asked for the GitHub URL. I'm going to paste that. So let's just get the Cypress smoke testing. And then, yeah, if you need the setup instructions, again, you should be able to find them in the README, and that should guide everything that you might need in this scenario. So test number 3. So this is our narrowest test yet. We want to check the input fields and the buttons to make sure that they're completely functional. So you can uncomment out this test, and this should allow text input in form fields. For example, we want to make sure that we want to basically select the username field. We want to test it out by letting Cypress type in something. In this case, it says test user. You can type in whatever you want. And you just want to essentially assert that the value you typed in is actually present and showing up in the username input field. So again, yeah, we're getting this, getting the username input box itself by using the test ID selector for username input. So this should be a test that you have in the repo. Task for you, you might need to, this has something that we haven't yet seen on the, in our previous tests, but we have special properties for passwords in Cypress. So you might want to reference the Cypress docs. But we want to check the password. We want to make sure that the password is masked. So if you type in a password, you should see it show up masked as dots instead of seeing the exact text that you're typing in, because that would be a little bit of a disaster. And then you can use the have attribute, have.attr, to just make sure that the text is in yes. Yeah, Will points out that the tests are each missing sci.visit. So make sure to add those to the beginning of each test, because otherwise your tests will not give you any useful input. Yeah, so going from here, just checking the password, making sure that everything works properly. It is in password form, and let me know if you have any questions there. But it's going to be, somewhat similar to how we did the workflow for the username itself, just with an additional step verifying that the password is obscured as it should be. All right. We also, another part of part 3 is we want to make sure that all buttons are enabled and clickable. So we're going to start by just checking the sign in button and just checking that it's enabled. There are many reasons that a button might be disabled. For example, maybe your app only enables the button after it has a valid username password input in the forms. It doesn't just let you click login if you don't type in a password or username. But in this case, I believe, like, looking at this, we don't need anything. The button is enabled and it just tells us, like, hey, go back, add something here. So we just want to make sure that, yeah, our sign in login button is working. Let's check the other buttons here. Let's check the guest button and the create account button. Those are, so we have the continuous guest, create account. Those should be enabled at all times. There shouldn't be any conditions to those. And the test IDs should be guest dash button and create dash account dash button, or you could, inspect the page and find the test IDs yourself. So I'm going to give you another 30 seconds to implement those other tasks. Again, if your tests aren't running, as Caitlin and Will have pointed out, every test will need a sci.visit statement. All right. Test number 4. So this is we're getting narrower and narrower, and we're going to be checking the accessibility attributes at this point. For example, you might have users who are using screen readers. They might need ARIA labels on each of the elements in order to get the full necessary functionality of the app, because if they don't have that, they are unable to navigate that. So we want to make sure that those are in place, rendered. They haven't been disrupted by a coding agent or by another UI mistake. So let's make sure that those are there. So you can uncomment this. Again, make sure to add a sci.visit at the very top of that. And these, you'll be able to see these if you go to the DevTools, just seeing They all should have ARIA elements, ARIA labels. We're still selecting by data test ID because we know that every single element has one of those, and making sure that it has the ARIA label attribute. And in this case, it's called login form. So you can kind of poke around in the live environment, see what's happening there, and just cross-reference to make sure that these are correct. We also want to make sure, like for example, we want to run these tests that will like kind of type in a user that doesn't yet exist in the database, because again, this is the login form, not the sign up form. So if we type in here invalid user and wrong password, there's no such user as that. We click it. We should ensure that we get a timeout, or no, we should ensure that we get an alert to let us know that no such thing exists. All right, so final task, we want to ensure that the username and password have the ARIA required attribute. This means that if someone is not able to proceed further from here unless they enter in content in the input and password box. So just making sure that we have the required attribute. And if we look back at our code, we can just see, we can also look at the Cypress docs and make sure that we have we're using the have attribute to assure that. Oh no, Will's user is actually logging in. That indicates, yeah, a logic issue with the app itself. Uh-oh, the invalid user is being let in. So that's not good. And that's something that we would escalate to the developers, and we'd say, hey, this is not good. Anyone with any nonsense they put in these forms is able to access the account, and maybe it's hitting the database. Yeah, exactly. As Davey says, the power of negative testing right there. Yeah, see, this is exactly the type of things that smoke testing can tell you. And it's funny because we were checking the total inverse. Or not exactly the inverse. We were just hoping that it would give us a little alert, like, hey, that doesn't work. But in fact, we had a little bit of a find there. And that's good because perhaps there weren't any other, perhaps we found out much sooner than we found better we find out through the smoke tests versus actually finding out through the full-fledged end-to-end tests much later on in the pipeline, much further on in the game. Yes. Oh, thank you so much for attending. I know someone has to drop out, but thank you so much for joining in. I hope this was great. And if you want to, keep following along, there is one last section in the repo, and you can, try that out yourself. So the last step of this is just automating this in your GitHub Actions CI/CD pipeline. I have this written out for you in the repo itself. You're going to go to the GitHub page itself and do this on your own. You are going to need to add one thing. You're going to need to go to the settings. This will only work on your fork because you need to be the main author of something. And what you're going to need to do, again, only from your fork, because you have to have ownership, going to your settings and going to secrets and variables, actions. You want to create a new repository secret. This should be something, in this case, in order to work with the GitHub Actions, you're going to call it shipyard URL, because that's what I called it in the YAML file. And you're going to take this URL of the live environment and paste it as the value. So I'll give you a little bit to do that. And then once you have that all set up, what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to go to the Actions tab. I'll just show you super quickly. We have our GitHub workflow, our smoke tests here. This is the shipyard URL that we've set in our GitHub Action secret, so we can reference that there. I set it here, workflow dispatch, which means that we'll have a special button in our actions that we can click, and we can run these essentially anytime we click that button. We can also set these to work up, set these to listen to every new deployment, perhaps, if that's something that you want to test as soon as a build is ready, to instantly run those smoke tests and get that real instant feedback. So you can go either proceed to the next stage of testing or go back to the drawing board. But essentially here, we're checking out our code, setting up Node, installing dependencies, and then we are running this test spec. And so you can go to your actions here, smoke tests, and then you can see this is our workflow dispatch event trigger. I'm going to run mine. Run workflow. Now it's kicking that off. Super simple. Our pipeline, essentially all it does is it runs that same Cypress command that we were running every time we wrote more tests. Also, it's important to take note, in this repo right now, I still have all my tests commented out except that first one. So we're not going to get huge results there. We're just going to see like, oh, it visited the base URL, and the API itself was returning 200. So yeah, we had 2 tests, both passing 4 seconds. And the reason it was as long as 4 seconds is because we did have those sci.wait commands. So yeah, feel free to go in, run the workflow. It should be pretty quick for you. It should be like maybe at most like 50 seconds. And as a result, you have instant Cypress smoke tests for an app. And it's really nice. I appreciate how quick, how lightweight Cypress smoke tests can be. And for a use case such as the recipe book, just making sure that everything is in order every single time, and that we're getting the same exact rendering of the base before we check in and do anything deeper and interact with the database. I wanted to open the floor to any questions, any Q&A. If anyone has any questions about, how this, like the specifics of the tests themselves, or maybe how you would set this up on your own. I imagine like there are obviously many ways to do that, but just working off of, I appreciated working off of keeping this separate from the app itself and kind of going in blind without referencing the app code and building from there. I think that gave us tests with the most value because we could see how it was intended to look. Oh, thank you all so much. Oh, good source for GitHub Actions commands, learning or understanding. I really appreciate, like, GitHub has some awesome docs on GitHub Actions. Let me see if I can. You also, I think, I don't know if you know this, but one of the nice things about GitHub Actions is there are so many custom like community build actions. So you can essentially, if you don't know how to do something in GitHub, there's most likely GitHub Actions, there's most likely a pre-built action for that you can take and have success with that. And yeah, essentially, like for example, there's a Cypress GitHub action that can, I feel like there are actually a few, like there's a Cypress GitHub action that can record your workflow and like save the video to your GitHub, what's it called? The artifact registry. Yeah, but that's it. There are a lot, some official, some unofficial. And the nice thing is that since it's all in a GitHub runner, you don't necessarily need to worry so much about security because it's all contained within that. So if there is in fact malware, the blast radius is somewhat contained. Yeah. Does anyone have any more questions about, CI/CD testing? I'll also show you, this is the dashboard that lets us go to our recipe book environment. This is the Shipyard dashboard. So it's a 3-service app. I know we didn't quite go into the underlying architecture of the app itself. Oh yeah, Will asked, can you go over how you set up the GitHub Actions for this repo? And that's super nice because, GitHub designs it. They essentially intend it's something that you set up within github.com. It's not necessarily something you do on your own machine. But what you would do is typically you go to, you create a .github directory here. It will automatically make workflows. This is something that only lives on github.com. It's typically not like checked into your, I believe it's in the git ignore by default. Going into workflows, you can name your workflow whatever you want. In this case, I called it smoketests.yaml. And essentially there's some good, like especially on the docs, there's some good templates on must-haves for a GitHub Actions workflow. Like for example, you absolutely need a trigger here. You can also do it like on push. So this is read-only, on push. So every time I make a commit and push it, this will trigger and this will run. But you do need to define a job. You create a runner here. This is the smoke tests one, which is just a human chosen name. You give it like a base OS. I'm taking in my environment variable here because I want to make sure that the runner has access to it. And then you break it down into steps. And your steps can be like, this is an existing GitHub action. Oh, the steps for earlier, that is. Yeah, I believe, I don't know if I showed, oh, do you mean like the environment variable? Yeah, all I did was, oh, no, that's all good. Yeah, I just added a repository secret as, so I went to, you can only do this from your fork, but you go to the settings, I want to discard those changes. You go to secrets and variables, specific to the action scope. I create a new repository secret. I call it shipyard URL. I go to recipe book, I copy that link, I paste it as a value. Let me know if that cleared things up. Awesome, glad to hear. Yeah, so just another, yeah, so I didn't go into how the app was architected, but we do have it running here. It was super quick to build. You can see it took 4 seconds to build this app, which is awesome. And I also have a timeout. So the nice thing about Shipyard environments is they're super short-lived. So if I just want to do all my testing all at the same time, I can, set my SLV timeout to, 30 minutes, 5 hours, whatever I might need, run those tests. Once the tests are run and it hits the timeout, the environment will slowly retire. But if I want it back again, I can just click the start button and it will spin up just as quickly as it did the previous time. Yeah. And again, I can access both my facing services here. For example, like this is my API, which is I defined in the Docker Compose. It's just the base URL plus the API slug. And then if I just want to see the front end. Yeah. So I know we only have about 2 more minutes, but if anyone has any more questions, I'm more than happy to answer that. Again, if you want to do this on your own, the repo is on GitHub. Just gonna, Cypress smoke testing. You can go to bit.ly/Cypress 25 smoke. Make sure you fork that just so you have your own copy. Feel free to give it a star. And this is the directory. Yeah, all your Cypress tests are here. Yeah. All right. All right. I wanted to thank you all so much for attending. This was a super fun session. I feel like it was, really great to talk about this today. I think smoke testing is always a fun subject, and it's something that we could all use more of in our lives and in our apps. But I think that the most important thing to learn is that, yes, smoke testing, it really depends on your team and what their particular needs are. Yeah, thank you all.